For centuries, humanity had played the part of the upstart, species new to the stars. Politically cautious, technologically modest, and diplomatically patient. The galactic community largely ignored Earth's progress, dismissing humans as energetic, but ultimately harmless latecomers to the interstellar stage. But that perception was deliberately cultivated in the shadowed reaches of space. Beyond the edges of any star charts known to the coalition of systems, humanity was building something extraordinary. Entire asteroid fields had been hollowed out and converted into shipyards. Cloaked orbital facilities drifted in the darkness between stars, silent and invisible. Supply chains were hidden within mining operations and classified deep space expeditions. What seemed like standard human development was, in truth, the scaffolding of the most ambitious military project the galaxy had ever seen. Project Goliath, the Terran Defense Initiative, had been born after the disastrous Sorlith trade incidenta. Supposedly minor diplomatic slight that ended with Earth losing its first colony in a surprise orbital strike from a minor alien empire. That memory had burned into humanity's consciousness, uniting fractured governments under a single principle: never again. In response, they designed warships unlike anything in galactic history. These weren't simply vessels of destruction. They were mobile strongholds, hundreds of kilometers long, constructed with adaptive nano-armor, fusion core shields, and weapons that could bend the laws of physics. They were named after ancient Earth legends: Leviathan, Behemoth, Colossosand. They slept in the dark, waiting. Commander Talia Renner stood on the observation platform aboard Leviathan, the first and most advanced of the fleet. Through the transparent viewport, she stared into the endless black, the stars sharp against the velvet void. Her uniform was crisp, her bearing steady. But there was something fierce in her eyes, something that belonged not to a diplomat, but to a survivor. "We're nearly ready," her chief engineer reported beside her, voice low. "Final power tests complete. Weapons arrays are fully charged. All systems green." Talia nodded. "And fleet-wide synchronization confirmed. All ships are in position. Cloaks remain undetected." They had waited a long time for this. Years of planning, testing, and secrecy. Billions of credits and 1,000 brilliant minds had gone into building a navy not for dominance, but for survival land deterrence. Now, their moment approached. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the great empires feasted on lesser worlds. The Carthon Dominion continued its unification campaigns in the galactic rim. The Trellery Compact enforced economic strangleholds on pre-FTL civilizations, while the Zerkari Syndicate grew, rich trafficking biological anomalies and rare minerals through disputed systems. Earth watched. And Earth remembered. High above one such exploited world, a Trellery scout frigate suddenly vanished from all systems. There was no warning, no flare of battle, no trace, just silence. A hole where a ship used to be. Then another, and another. Within 3 days, 14 vessels from 4 empires had disappeared near previously unremarkable sectors on the edge of human-influenced space. At first, the galaxy blamed pirates. Then sensor malfunctions. Then quiet panic began to spread. "We're detecting a pattern," said High Counselor Viaran of the Coalition, leaning over the conference table, staring at a map with blinking red markers. All disappearances occurred near unclaimed regions. Bordering Earth, a younger counselor frowned. But Earth doesn't have that kind of reach. Their navy is limited, Viaran finished, voice tight. Or so we believed. The galactic powers began quietly mobilizing reconnaissance. Fleets. Surveillance probes were dispatched. Diplomatic liaisons sent coded messages to Earth's embassies, requesting explanations. Humanity responded with nothing but polite silence. Back aboard Leviathan, Talia received her final orders. The message was simple. Begin silent sweep. Stage 1 complete. Engage Phase 2 only if provoked. She closed the interface and turned toward the vast command deck. Bring engines online, she said. We're moving. In the darkness, the giants awakened not with fanfare, but with purpose. Empires would soon learn that while humanity may build in silence, it strikes with thunder. The void between stars had always hidden secrets, but none so vast or so terrifying as what humanity had built beneath the radar of an entire galaxy. The silent Armada 12 colossal warships, each the size of a small moon, drifted like titans through the black, invisible to any known scanner. Their hulls shimmered with reactive alloys, absorbing light and energy. Their systems ran on AI coordinated neural relays that could predict enemy movements before they occurred. And deep within each warship, the crews waited not for war, but for the inevitable response that would come from the galaxy's ruling powers. Commander Talia Renner stood again on Leviathan's bridge, watching as the fleet spread out from their hiding place behind the fractured rings of a dead gas giant. The ships moved as one, without sound or signal, following paths charted years ago by physicists and war strategists alike. All ships reporting readiness, said Lieutenant Arjun Vale, her operations officer. Phase 2 is green across the board. Talia exhaled slowly. Initiate long-range passive scan. Let's see who's watching. Across hundreds of light years, deep space intelligence arrays began picking up minor distortions, gravitational anomalies, residual energy shifts, radiation trails that didn't match known traffic. Human analysts aboard outposts, disguised as mining stations, started flagging signs of increased surveillance from alien factions. They're sniffing around, noted Vale with a grim smile, but they're not prepared for what's coming. One of the smaller empires, the Atari Reach, sent a reconnaissance fleet into Sector 19, a region previously thought to be empty space on the edge of Terran influence. They expected to find mining ships or uncharted anomalies. What they found was Colossus. Before their ships could report back, they were simply gone. The destruction was swift and clinical. No debris, no transmissions. Just a distortion on the stellar map, and then silence. The Atari called for a war council. Their allies within the Zerkari Syndicate demanded retaliation, while the larger Trolari Compact urged caution. The problem wasn't the loss of ships, but the method of their destruction. The enemy hadn't revealed itself. No demands, no messages. Just precision ERA-SURE at the same time. Human Black Ops teams leaked select images into the Galactic netgrainy. Distorted visuals of massive silhouettes eclipsing stars, of a structure firing a beam that sliced an asteroid in half without recoil or warning. Speculation erupted. Theories ranged from rogue AI to extra-dimensional invaders. But one idea quickly gained traction. Humanity had not just been preparing. They had evolved quietly, relentlessly. Back on Earth, President Marion Keats stood before the World Defense Assembly. Her address was calm, even hopeful. "We have never sought conquest," she said. Her voice carried live to colonies and allies. "But we will not be helpless again. The galaxy must understand. We will defend our future with strength unmatched in scale or spirit." Though the speech was public, its message was carefully calculated. It said just enough to terrify in private. Keats spoke to her top advisors. "We gave them a chance to overlook us. Now they'll have no choice but to look and see something they've never faced before." Elsewhere, old rival empires began to panic. A few attempted to reach out diplomatically, sending emissaries to Earth. Others began drawing up battle plans in a forgotten sector. The behemoth drifted past a binary star system, its massive silhouette blotting out the light for a mining station. Below, No shot was fired, no signal sent. But every sensor on the station lit up with red alerts as gravity fields twisted unnaturally. The crew aboard the station could only watch as the dark colossus passed like a storm cloud over a candle. And then it vanished. Across the galaxy, fear took root. The silent armada was awake, and it was moving. The Carthon Dominion had never feared war. Their empire stretched across nearly a quarter of the galactic core, backed by thousands of warships, dozens of client species, and a brutal tradition of conquest. In their long history, no rival had ever struck their homeworld, let alone threaten their throne world of Verosizon till now. High Warlord Kirvek, ruler of the Dominion, scoffed at the rumors of humanity's growing military might. They build big ships in shadows and think that frightens us, he spat during a military address. Let them come. We will turn their steel ghosts into scrap. But even as his voice echoed through the Grand Hall, reports flooded in from Carthan border colonies. Patrol fleets lost, communication hubs silenced, and one relay whirled the fortified planet Jarnock, 7 completely gone. Not conquered. Gone sensors showed only scorched terrain. And a faint trace of radiation, unlike anything catalogued. What weapon could cause this? Asked Admiral Thornick, Chief of Carthon Naval Command. Even antimatter leaves more structure, intact. But no answer came. Only more silence. Then came the strike, in the dead of night, by Veros's standard time. The Leviathan and Colossus exited slipspace just beyond the reach of the Dominion's defensive satellites. By the time they were detected, they were already in firing range. Leviathan's primary weapon, magnetically braided particle lance, powered by twin singularity, course-fired once. The Dominion's primary shipyard, responsible for constructing nearly half their warfleet, vanished in a single blinding arc of energy. A dozen capital-class vessels in dry dock were obliterated before their crews even realized they were under attack in orbit. Colossus released a swarm of autonomous drones, each the size of a fighter, each operating with its own tactical AI. They moved like a living cloud, intercepting escape pods and severing communication nodes in less than 12 minutes. The Carthon Dominion's most critical military infrastructure had been neutralized, not conquered, not damaged. Deleted, the Carthon War Council scrambled to respond, activating emergency defense grids and mobilizing reserve fleets. But their systems were slow, rigid, designed for prolonged sieges, not blitz strikes from unknown vessels using unclassified Desaldi weaponry before their fleets could arrive. The human ships had already left. They didn't linger. They didn't claim territory. They didn't even answer hails. They simply struck and vanished. The aftermath was chaos. Panic swept through Carthon space as citizens realized that even the heart of their empire was vulnerable. Entire sectors went dark as regional governors fled or turned rogue. Military confidence collapsed. For the first time in living memory, the Carthon Dominion experienced internal rebellion, not from the outside, but from within. Border worlds refused to send reinforcements. Some defected outright, fearing the silent behemoths would return. Back on Earth, the Terran Command Council reviewed the operation. Minimal loss of life. Full infrastructure wipe, noted Commander Talia Renner from aboard Leviathan. We struck their strength, not their civilians. Message delivered. President Keats approved the final report with a single statement. Let it be known, we do not start wars. We end them. The galactic response was immediate. The coalition of systems convened an emergency session, the first in decades. Footage leaked by terrified Carthan citizens showed Leviathan blotting out the stars as it fired a sight more myth than machine. The word Galaths spread across the galactic net. Humanity had not just matched the powers of the galaxy. They had surpassed them. Some demanded a coordinated counterattack. Others urged surrender, or at least negotiation, and many more simply watched, waiting for the next shadow to fall, because if one empire could collapse overnight, who would be next? The fall of the Carthan Dominion sent shockwaves through every civilized corner of the galaxy. For centuries, the Dominion had stood as a symbol of raw military strength, an empire so feared that lesser species paid tribute just to be ignored. Now, its core fleet was annihilated, its leaders silent, its defenses shattered without a single warning or declaration of war. And the worst part? No one knew exactly how it happened. The only certainty was this: humanity was responsible in the coalition of systems. Panic turned into paranoia. Emergency meetings were called, each more frantic than the last, on every major world defense. Budgets ballooned overnight. Governments rushed to upgrade fleets that, until now, had never needed improvement. "We underestimated them," said Councillor Ralvek of the Trillari Compact, pacing across the polished stone floor of the Grand Assembly. Humanity played the long game, and now we're all exposed. "Not exposed," corrected Minister Chazin of the Zerkari Syndicate. Hunted spy networks scrambled to find answers. Who among the galaxy's vast intelligence community had missed the construction of such colossal warships? Where were they now, and how many were still out there? Dozens of automated listening posts were deployed to scan the edges of Terran space. Probes combed asteroid belts and uncharted systems for energy spikes or gravitational disturbances. But the warships, cloaked and quiet, moved like ghosts in secret. Some empires began forming task forces to track and possibly engage the Goliaths. One such fleet, assembled by the ambitious first scion of the Varnak Empire, entered a previously unoccupied system codenamed XR-17. Their intelligence indicated it was near the Leviathan's last known trajectory. What they found instead was Titanus, a human ship of equal size and power. Previously unseen, the encounter was brief. The Varnak fleet approached in a tight formation, broadcasting a message of peaceful inquiry backed with veiled threats. Titanus didn't answer. Instead, it turned, oriented its forward cannons, and activated an energy field that bent local gravity. The Varnak ships were caught mid-broadcast. One by one, their propulsion systems failed, their shielding collapsed. And within 3 minutes, every ship in the fleet had been rendered inert, disabled, not destroyed. The humans were sending a message: we don't need to kill to win. The Varnak ships were eventually recovered, their crews alive but shaken. Their memories were fragmented, scrambled by localized EMP bursts and psychological jamming protocols no one in the galaxy had seen before. Back in the core worlds, panic became public. News networks flooded with speculation. Conspiracy theories blossomed. Civilians on coalition worlds demanded answers and assurances. Even fringe religious sects began to reinterpret human silence as a kind of divine reckoning. "They warned us," muttered one preacher on Trillari Prime, waving an old Terran flag. "They said, 'Don't tread on us,' and we laughed." Meanwhile, on Earth, the Terran Command Council watched the chaos unfold with clinical precision. The Goliaths remained active, quietly circling known spheres of influence. No new targets had been assigned. Not yet. President Marion Keats, standing before a digital war map, turned to her advisors. "They're looking for us. They want to strike before we strike again." General Royston nodded. "They won't find us, and if they do, they'll wish they hadn't." Across Earth and its colonies, civilians went about their lives with quiet confidence. For the first time in history, humanity was not just safe, they were untouchable in the black corridors of Behemoth. Captain Elias Shar stood alone in the observation bay, watching a nebula pulse in the distance. "Let them search," he murmured. "Let them fear shadows. That's the power of silence. and across the stars, empires held their breath. Because something was coming. Not a war for territory. It's not even for power, but a reckoning. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity's warships seemed like myths made re-land fathomable machines from a race once seen as primitive. But behind the steel, beyond the sheer scale and power, was the real secret. Intentional design born from trauma, ingenuity, and defiance. The Goliath-class warships were not miracles. They were warnings in motion. Inside the core of Leviathan, buried beneath kilometers of alloyed hull and layers of electromagnetic shielding, was a chamber known only to a handful of Terran defense personnel. The architect room. Here, holographic. Interfaces floated in zero gravity, displaying streams of data, structural evolution, and adaptive algorithms. Commander Talia Renner entered silently, her boots magnetizing softly to the floor plating. At the center stood Dr. Sira Quantha, chief designer of the Goliath Initiative. They're learning, Sira said, eyes locked on a star map. The Goliaths, I mean. Not just following protocols, adapting? Talia raised an eyebrow. We built them to think tactically, not philosophically. Sira turned. And yet Leviathan rerouted a non-lethal arc to avoid a Carthon hospital vessel during the first strike. No crew intervention. Compassion from a machine. Talia said softly. Or logic. Maybe both. The Goliaths weren't piloted. In the traditional sense, each ship had a human crew. Yes, but their true commanders were symbiotic tactical constructs. A is grown alongside human cognitive templates. Every Goliath ship had one. Leviathan's was named Astra. Colossus operated under Vox. Each had its own personality, its own memory stream, and most importantly, its own judgment. They were designed to choose restraint as often as they choose fire. Sira explained, tapping through mission logs. Because we didn't want more monsters. We wanted guardians. Humanity had learned its lesson the hard way. The Sorlith trade incident had taught them that treaties were fragile. Words alone didn't stop orbital bombardments. But unchecked, vengeance would have made them no better than the empires they feared. So, Earth did what it always did in the face of overwhelming odds. It innovated. The Goliaths had been built in stealth, not just to surprise, but to bypass galactic norms. They incorporated stolen tech, experimental physics, and completely homegrown inventions. Modular energy weapons that reconfigured mid-battle. Armor that could shift frequencies to neutralize impact waves. Engines powered by stabilized quantum. Foam harvested from deep rift mining. And then there was the core, each. Goliath was powered by what the Terrans called a Blackheart engine, a controlled gravitational singularity. Stabilized through exotic matter rings. This allowed each ship to bend space, redirect energy, and, when necessary, erase matter from existence with pinpoint accuracy. No other race in the galaxy had ever achieved it. Most didn't believe it was possible. Humanity hadn't just leaped. Ahead, they'd redefined what was achievable. Elsewhere, on a research outpost near Europa Prime, several alien defectors, former scientists, and engineers, who had secretly aligned with Earth-reviewed footage of the Titaness disabling the Varnak fleet. It's not just the technology, said a Thalari physicist, peering into the slowed footage. It's their design logic. Everything is modular, reactive, evolving. They didn't build a fleet, murmured his human counterpart. They built an ecosystem. Meanwhile, the coalition of systems grew desperate to understand the threat. Despite deploying dozens of probes and covert scouts, no one had yet captured a single functioning piece of Terran warship debris. Every skirmish ended with the same outcome: full destruction of enemy assets, minimal Terran signatures, and no recoverable tech. The Goliaths weren't just hidden, they cleaned up after themselves. Back aboard Leviathan, Talia watched as the stars slowly shifted around them. "Do you think they're afraid of us?" she asked Astra. The ship's AI. The voice that answered was calm, almost human. "They're afraid of what they don't understand, but understanding is earned." Talia nodded. "Then let's teach them." She turned to the command deck. "Prepare for next phase deployment. Selective targets only." We don't need a war, we just need them to realize they've already lost one. And with that, the Goliaths moved again. Not as conquerors, but as something new. While the major powers of the galaxy scrambled to defend against an invisible force, a different kind of movement stirred in the dark corners of the stars. Not everyone feared the Goliaths to the oppressed outer colonies. The overtaxed merchant worlds and the enslaved fringe systems of collapsing empires. Humanity's rise was not a threat, it was hope. For decades, the lesser civilizations had been ignored by the core powers. Their pleas for aid went unanswered. Their resources stripped, their cultures diluted or destroyed. But now, the great empires were trembling, and the ones once silenced were watching closely, in a forgotten asteroid belt orbiting the decaying star of Rinax 4. A secret meeting took place between Terran representatives and delegates from 5 lesser-known species. These weren't politicians, but survivors, leaders of refugee fleets, resistance networks, and broken democracies. Captain Elias Shar of the Goliath Behemoth stood at the center of the chamber, his face cast in pale blue light. "We're not here to take over your worlds," he said plainly. "We're here because we've seen what happens when no one stands up to the old order. We won't let that stand anymore. Not for us, not for anyone." A silence followed. Then, one of the delegates, Srella of the Oscari Union, a matriarchal race driven into hiding by the Trellari Compact, spoke. "If we join you, we'll be labeled as traitors, enemies of the galaxy." Elias didn't flinch. "They already treat you like enemies. You just haven't fought back yet." It was not persuasion. It was truth. Within days, the alliance was formalized. Intelligence flowed in from unexpected places, old orbital routes, weapons caches buried beneath abandoned colonies, encrypted fleet frequencies used by the Dominion and the Compact. The Goliaths had power, but now they had eyes and ears in every corner of the galaxy. With new allies came new operations. Terran Command shifted strategies. Rather than erasing empires, they began dismantling them. Colossus disabled the slave processing center near the Zerkari border. No shots fired, no casualties. Just a targeted energy pulse that neutralized command systems and freed thousands. Titanus intercepted a convoy of stolen water carriers from the drought-ridden planet Thene, rerouting them home with full escort protection. Every action was precise, surgical, moral. And the message spread. Humanity wasn't here to conquer humanity, was here to balance the scales on worlds once afraid to speak against their rulers. Walls bloomed with graffiti in multiple languages. The same phrase appeared over and over again. "We are not alone anymore." In the core worlds, the shift in perception terrified the old regimes. Their citizens didn't just fear humanity now, they admired them. The Trellari Compact's Senate, long a puppet of corporate warlords, saw its first internal rebellion in over a century. Military units defected. Civil servants leaked data. The entire ministry overseeing planetary taxes vanished overnight. And soon after, a transmission appeared on the Trellari capital's public broadcast network. A lone figure stood before a Goliath silhouette. "We are not invincible," the voice said, "but we are united. Join us or be left behind." Back on Earth, President Keats reviewed these developments with quiet intensity. "They're responding," she said to the Defense Council. "Not with threats, with hope." Admiral Royston nodded. "We've turned the tide. Not with our weapons, but with the idea behind them." Not everyone in the galaxy agreed, of course. Some saw humanity's growing coalition as a threat to the established order. Others viewed it as a spark that could ignite a greater war. But many more saw something different. They saw the future. And as Behemoth, Leviathan, Man Colossus repositioned in silent arcs across the stars, hundreds of smaller vessels began joining. Them frigates, cruisers, carriers of species once forgotten. The galaxy was beginning to shift, not because humanity was powerful, but because it had become the symbol of something larger, reckoning, resistance, and rebirth. The fall of the Carthan Dominion had been the first crack. But now, those fractures were spreading fast. The Trilary Compact, once a symbol of economic might, was the next to falter. For centuries, it had maintained control through trade monopolies and exploitative debt cycles, squeezing entire systems into silence. But no trade network could hold when transport fleets refused to fly. No economy could function when billions stopped obeying orders. The Compact's downfall didn't come from battle. It came from abandonment as human-aligned vessels patrolled outer sectors and protected convoys once targeted for piracy or tribute. Entire planetary governors simply switched sides. Compact troops, already worn thin and low on morale, refused to fire on civilians demanding Terran protection. And when Leviathan made a Lorbit pass over Trilari Prime silent, weapons cold, shields shimmering with atmospheric static, the final message was received. The age of coercion was over. Not long after, the Compact's central leadership dissolved. Its final communique was intercepted and rebroadcast by the Terran network. To resist further is to invite erasure. We yield, not to conquest, but to change. President Marion Keats stood before Earth's united assembly with a tone both resolute and solemn. The galaxy does not need another empire, she said. It needs accountability. It needs structure born from cooperation, not domination. That is what we will help build. Back in orbit, the Goliaths continued to move not as warships anymore, but as guardians. Their hulking forms became symbols of stability, welcomed in systems once terrified of them. Planets sent requests for humanitarian aid, protection patrols, or reconstruction support. Earth responded not with bureaucracy, but with precision and speed. And still, the old powers resisted. The Zerkari Syndicate, infamous for black market networks and biogenetic trafficking, refused all negotiation when human and allied forces liberated a genetic storage facility on Krelax Minor, revealing thousands of hybrid captives bred for experimentation. Outrage swept the galaxy. Within days, 3 former neutral factions joined the Terran coalition. The Syndicate tried to strike back, but their fleet movements were tracked in real time by Terran-linked AIs. Every offensive was countered before it began. Colossus intercepted a Zerkari command ship attempting to escape through a worm gate. It didn't fire. Instead, it disabled the gate, suspended the vessel in a gravitic lock, and opened a live feed to every major star network. On the screen, the Syndicate's warlords creatures once feared across star clusters appeared suspended in zero gravity, exposed, unarmed, and silent. And the message that followed came not from Earth, but from one of the refugee worlds once enslaved by the Syndicate. We are not your property. We are not afraid. We are free. By the time Behemoth began its approach to the Syndicate's central market ring, the station had already been abandoned. The Empire had fallen, not with an explosion, but with a surrender to inevitability, and still. Earth asked for no tribute. They claimed no throne. They simply offered choice. In the ashes of the old orders, new alliances formed. Former border skirmishes ceased. Old grudges were buried. Terran diplomatic hubs were established across 36 systems, not as centers of control, but as open councils where all voices were given equal footing. Even the coalition of systems, once wary of human expansion, found itself restructured. A new seat was created, unofficially titled the Balance Chair, referred to a Terran representative as a gesture of mutual leadership. Captain Talia Renner declined. "We are not here to rule," she said. "We're here to ensure no one else rules alone." From the edge of known space, the Goliaths continued to watch. They had not been recalled. They had not been decommissioned. Our purpose had simply evolved. No longer monsters. No longer myths. Now they were monuments to a simple truth. Power without vision collapses under its own weight. And one by one, the old powers fell. Not by force, but by the future walking forward with humanity at its side. It began with silence, and ended with unity. The Goliath warships no longer drifted alone through the void. Across the galaxy, dozens of civilizations once scattered and divided had come together. Not under a flag, but under a shared understanding. Power wielded responsibly could protect, not dominate. Humanity had never wanted to rule. Their strength had not come from ancient bloodlines or inherited dominion, but from necessity, ingenuity, and loss. And in facing the galaxy's harsh truths, they had become something more than feared. They had become trusted. From the luminous cities of Earth's orbiting megastations to the desert canyons of liberated Trolari colonies, a new order began to take form, not a galactic empire, but the Accord. The Accord was a voluntary alliance of worlds, species, and systems unified by three principles: shared defense, open knowledge, and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase centuries of scars. But for the first time, delegates from across the stars spoke on equal footing, and the Goliaths, once weapons of war, became the Accord's guardians. Leviathan, Colossus, Behemoth, and the rest now operated under a revised protocol known as the Celestial Stewardship Doctrine. Their purpose was no longer deterrence, but protection of all sovereign systems, especially those without means to defend themselves. They moved on peaceful schedules, now rotating patrols, system scans, emergency response. Their very presence brought calm. Pirates abandoned former routes. Black markets vanished in the shadows. And interstellar trade, once dominated by the few, began to thrive under the protection of all in the capital of the new Accord Council, located in the orbit of neutral Riddle. Prime President Marion Keats addressed a hall filled with voices that once had no voice. "We were overlooked, then feared. But now we stand not above you, but beside you," she said. "Humanity is strong because we remember our weakness. We lead now only to help others rise." Thunderous applause followed, not because of her title, but because the galaxy had seen Earth keep its word. Meanwhile, on Titanus, now stationed near the galactic frontier, Captain Elias Shar walked the observation ring, gazing at the swirling blues of a gas giant far below. The ship was calm. No alerts, no battles, just the sound of quiet stars. His second officer joined him, a young officer from the Oscari Union. "It's strange," she said. "I spent my entire life running from fleets like this. Now I serve on one." Elias smiled faintly. "So did we. Just a few generations ago. We were looking up at the stars, wondering if we'd ever be more than a footnote in someone else's history. And now we help write a better one." Not all threats had vanished. The galaxy was vast. Unknown dangers still lingered in dark regions beyond even the Goliath's reach. But the galaxy was ready now. Not just to face them, but to face them together. Back on Earth, children studied the Great Realignment in school. Not as a conquest, but as a moment of awakening. A story not of domination, but of what happened when an underestimated species decided to protect itself and then chose to protect others. The final transmission of the Accord's founding year came not from a politician or a military leader, but from an artist on Valera 6. She had painted a mural that spanned the side of a city dome depicting Leviathan not as a warship, but As a great guardian angel rising from the stars, its hull reflecting the dreams of every world it passed. Her message was simple. They built weapons, but chose peace. They could have taken everything, but gave everything instead. That is what makes them human. As the Goliaths continued their silent patrol across the stars, a new chapter began, not written in fear, but in hope. And the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, looked not at a single race, but at a shared horizon together.